You're listening to the Clean Comedy Podcast with JamesDCreviston and LukeLacoy.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Clean Comedy Podcast. It's James. Today, I'm here with my co-host, Mr. LukeLacoy. Luke.
Hi. Hello.
And it's awkward as usual introducing Luke. But today we have probably the funniest guy that is not awkward and should actually, if you saw him on the street, you'd be like, hey, that guy's a rock star, right? Like, he's a rock star and he performs in stadiums and like he gets all the ladies, but he's not a rock star. He should be a rock star. He still gets the ladies, but he is also one of the funniest comedians I've ever heard of in my life. Please welcome the very funny, the very talented Jeff Shaw.
This is great. Is this like a comedy version of Dungeons and Dragons where we can be anything we want?
What do you want to be, Jeff?
This is great. I love this. I love that having a character built for me by the comedy dungeon master. Yeah, I'll tell you what a rock star I am. I have the uncanny ability of walking into any guitar center and crushing the spirit of any teenage bass player. All I need to say is, no, kid, I am not Geddy Lee from Rush. And that kind of bums me out, too, because the only thing worse than being a goofy-looking dude with long hair and a high voice is being the wrong goofy-looking dude with long hair and a high voice. Are you the bass player from Rush? No, I'm the lead singer from REO Speedwagon. I don't like REO Speedwagon. Well, in that case, kid, I'm Owen Wilson with a nose job.
So I love your album, Jeff with two F's.
Thanks, man.
And I appreciate you that you shared it with us. One of the funniest things, and I said this to Luke earlier, I said, I don't know how you do it, but the NASCAR driver bit where you have the 3 different speeches, I have no idea how you memorize and perform that just like that in that rapid way. It is amazing. You blew my mind. I'm listening to it going, well, no, I'd ever remember that bit, ever.
You can learn exactly how to do it if you order my new DVD set, How to Write a Hacky Nascar Bit, for 3 easy payments of $29.95. I will teach you how to write a joke form that peaked in the late 80s. To impress a lot of old people on cruise ships.
There you
go. Yeah, the typical comic can't take a compliment, but that bit actually, I used to do a lot of those like long ranty bits. I think that's like the last one because over the years, that's something I kind of like. I did a lot back in the 90s, and then I started seeing a lot of people doing the same thing. So it became like a thing, so I stopped doing them. But that one, just like my other long-winded rants that I've had, they were perfected over years and years. And even a simple one like that, I'm constantly updating it, like making sure that I have contemporary drivers in there and sometimes change a word because it's a little awkward. But when you do things like that, it actually takes a long time to get it right.
Yeah, it's just such a good like bit. Just the speech portion of it is so quick, but there's so many pieces that you hit that are like a real speech after a NASCAR thing. And I was like, oh my gosh. And you do it 3 times in a row, 3 separate versions of it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. That's the one that blew me away.
Yeah. And then what I try to do too, when I'm doing bits like that I consider to be, not all that original, I try to make it more original by like having him, the one race driver, do the whole dissertation on why the subprime mortgage loan crisis happened in 2008. That's a typical type of mix format, for an act out. But and I'm glad that you guys like that bit because I like to think that if you can nail a bit, sometimes having a perfect bit will transcend the subject matter, the form. So everybody knows maybe it's something that's been done before. Maybe it's not the most original, but if you can just add all the elements and get them just right, then nobody can say anything. That's how, George Carlin was able to win a Grammy on for Jammin' in New York. Yeah. At 1992, airline bits have been hacked for 20 years, and you had the best comedian in the country take a subject, airline travel, that everybody did on the Tonight Show, and turn it into one of the best bits about airline travel of all time. And even now, when you see comedians, you can see modern contemporary comedians talk about relationships, shopping, flying, and middle-aged comics going in for their checkup or whatever. But the best comedians make you forget that you're listening to a bit about that topic, and they just bring you into the world. So there really are no hack subject. There's no such thing as hackneyed subjects or topics or subject matter. It's all about the premise. If you've got a great premise, you can do a 7-Eleven bit. If you've got a great premise, verbal gymnastics skill, and a lot of time alone on a cruise ship with no friends, that you can stand in front of the mirror and repeat a stupid NASCAR bit over and over again, then
it's impressive. And then I was also excited because I found out that you were a veteran. I didn't know you were a veteran. And then I'm also a veteran. I'm a Navy veteran. So I always appreciate it.
Oh, really? I was in the armed forces. No, yeah. I was in the Army. And how long were you in the Navy?
I was there from 99 to 2003.
Oh, great. Well, I was I worked for Carnival Cruise Lines for 10 years as a staff member from 2007 to 2017. I worked as a crew member for 10 years because that's what unemployed comedians did before Uber.
Were you also?
So I called it the Navy Light.
Yeah.
Because if I found it difficult to work on a cruise ship where I could, just run amok. I mean, it was really difficult. I can imagine what it was like to be in the Navy. Oh,
I loved it. I had a lot of fun. I probably would still be in or be getting ready to get out. But I met my wife, so that changed the trajectory of my life at that point. So
I would have been in like 37 years. Think at the rate I was going, I'd be corporal by now.
So
it's funny. I when people tell me, they go like, I like telling people that I'm a veteran, and that's one of the first things I say on stage, in my act, right? It's about, I don't tell people I'm a veteran, to impress anybody who's served. I do it to embarrass anybody who was ever turned down by the military, and then I also say on the album that I like the look on people's faces when I tell them I'm a veteran. Their mouths say thank you for your service, but their eyes say don't ask, don't tell. But it's like I was in the reserves for 6 years, and people tell me, they go, thank you for your service, and I'm like, yeah, no problem. I was very proud to be going through the drive-through at McDonald's for my commanding officers, and to be washing Jeeps, and to be sorting through training manuals and putting batteries and flashlights once a month, because I served during peacetime in the 80s. And so, we just pretty much just washed Jeeps and took classes and drank beer.
Hey, that's
a whole different Army Reserves now.
So how did you even get started in comedy? How did you get started in stand-up? Like, how did that come about? What did you know you wanted to be a stand-up comedian?
Well, I've always been a huge stand-up comedy fan. I was a little boy, I gravitated towards, of course, the usual suspects, The Tonight Show. I discovered Saturday Night Live when I was 12. But earlier it was Merv Griffin, Dinah Shore, Mike Douglas Show, seeing the comedians on there, and of course The Tonight Show. And I was a big fan of comedy albums as a kid. So I went to a library and I had everything, I would rent, Andy Griffith, Bill Cosby, George Carlin when I was a little bit older.
Yeah.
But like Bob Newhart.
Bob Newhart's one of my favorites of all time. Like, I absolutely love Bob Newhart. Yeah.
Shelley Berman, Nichols and May, and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. And so I loved reciting, memorizing comedy albums. And then what happened was, in 6th grade, we moved down to Tennessee because my dad got a job. We moved down there the year Elvis died. I have an alibi, by the way. And I discovered two things: Kiss,
Yeah.
and Saturday Night Live. So Saturday Night Live, it already been on for a couple of years, but I just started watching it back then, and I saw Andy Kaufman. When I saw Andy Kaufman for the first time, that was it. So in the 6th grade, I developed a little routine, which is basically a ripoff of Andy Kaufman's Foreign Man character. And all I did is I put my own little bits in it. And now I'd like to do an impression of my Aunt Esther. You're a bad boy. Eat your vegetables. Thank you very much. And now I would like to do an impression of the Mr. John Denver. Far out. Thank you very much. I was a big John Denver fan when I was a kid. And then I had, so basically I put together this little act. And then I won first place in a talent show at school. And my first, I already got to tell you, I knew I was going to be in show business when I reamed out the teacher for bringing me down 30 seconds to a minute before I was done. I had one more bit to go, and I was like, I told you, and I was like, somewhere the comedy gods were looking above, going, all right, that kid's gonna be a cruise ship comic someday. he's gonna give a lot of club owners ulcers. But and then I started doing that same act at talent shows at churches and campgrounds. And then when we moved back up to Cleveland, when I went into junior high, we got cable. And so I started watching all the Showtime laugh-offs and all the comedy specials. And at this time, I'd already been turned on to George Carlin and Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
And then I remained a huge fan. I even bought comedy albums with my own, I bought metal albums, comedy albums. I was a big metalhead and big comedy head. And then I took a drama class my senior year of high school, a theater arts class. And we had to do little skits, and sketches. And it's the first time anybody said, hey, that's a nice skit. You should put it in your comedy show. It's usually the other way around.
Yeah.
But so I took acting classes and I did a lot of like videos and sketches and stuff like that. And my teacher said, wow, you're really funny. You've got a great sense of humor. You should think of doing open mic night at the Cleveland Comedy Club when you're old enough.
Oh. And
I said, well, what's that? She said, well, she explained to me what open mic was. And that stuck in my head. So I went into the Army. And when I was at the Defense Language Institute, Monterey, California, I became a big David Letterman fan because some of my fellow students were watching at night. And then that's where I saw Stephen Wright on the show and on Letterman, and Emo on Letterman. So when I came home, I bought both of their albums. And then when I went back to finish, after my break, to finish the rest of my education at the language school, the rest of the course, I noticed they had an open mic night at the Enlistment's Club. And so I wanted to go try comedy then, but I never did. And so when I came back in the summer of '86 from active duty and went back to being a full-time reservist, I looked up the Cleveland Comedy Club. And like a week after I saw Eddie Murphy in front of 18,000 people at Blossom Music Center, I went up for my first open mic night.
Wow. That is
and I was like 19 years old, 19 years old, something like that, 19, 20, something like that. It was August. It was either August 18th or 16th, 1986, whatever that Sunday was.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
And now you've done a lot of cruise ship stand up too, right? And I think you talked, you mentioned at one point that you helped set up some of the, was it Carnival Cruise Lines punchliner? Is that what it is? Or which,
yes.
what? Yeah. So how did you get into that? Because I know a lot of comedians, like there used to be, that was a taboo place to perform. Like perform on a cruise ship was kind of like now what people think about going to Vegas. Like that's where careers go to die, right? Like those, but now that's not true. It's like one of the best places for comedians because you get to try out material to basically a crowd that one can't escape you at all ever. And then two, you can make sure that
No,
those
but
bits.
they can kill you though.
Yeah, they can kill you. That's true.
They
But
can
then
put you overboard.
but then also the other thing is that crowd, that you have a more diverse crowd on that ship than you might have, in an LA comedy club or a New York comedy club, in that situation. So now you have to make sure your material crosses all lines and meets for everyone. So how does that work, getting into the cruise ship comedy business, and how hard is it, or how fun is it? Like what's your experience with that?
Well, I started working the road in the August of 1987, or September, it was a month after I saw Martin Mull live from North Ridgeville. That he lived there when he was a kid, and they did a HBO special from our middle school where he
Wow.
and so from 87, September of 87 to summer of 2004, I worked the road full time. And from 2002 to 2004, my last 2 years in stand-up, a friend of mine got me in with Carnival Cruise Lines, and I was a headlining, ship comic, and I really liked it. But then in 2004, I was able to parlay 5 years of writing humor essays for newspapers and weekly magazines and the first few online comedy magazines. I was able to get a job working full time as a staff writer for American Greetings, which is headquartered here in Cleveland, Ohio, my hometown. And so I got a job in the creative studios as a full-time humor writer. So I retired from the road for that. And then after a couple of years, when I got laid off, when I lost my job, I was destitute. I was working I turned 40 and then lost my dream job that I spent like almost 2 decades getting. And so I wound up working in a mailroom at a law firm, at a copy center. And I think my 41st birthday, my parents took me to see the Borat movie and took me to dinner to cheer me up. Then they took me to J.C. Penney with their credit card. They had points, and they got me a suit and a haircut. And then the next day I had 2 jobs, a job working those copy centers and mailrooms, and then ushering at Hilarity's Comedy Club in Cleveland, club I headlined a couple of years previously. It was like the club I started at. So 6 months of that, I was desperate to find my way out, and I contacted Carnival Cruise Lines and asked them if I could be a cruise director. And they told me the program is anywhere from 2 to 6 years to become a cruise director. One thing led to another. I had a cousin who lent me the money for the physical, which was $500. And then by summer of 2007, I was quitting my jobs and packing up my entire life. I put my apartment in storage. And then I was a newly minted blue short wearing, name tag wearing, entertainment staff member for Carnival Cruise Lines, activity host, or whatever you want to call it. And so after a tough time, the first couple of months where I didn't fit in, they sent me to a ship in San Diego. And it's when you work on cruise ships, it's all about the cruise director. And there was an Australian cruise director by the name of Stu Dunn, and our ship was ported in San Diego. And he and I hit it off right off the bat. And it turns out that he was my cruise director when I was a comedian, like one of my ships that I did, and he loved me. Awesome. So we hit it right off, and we became like Batman and Robin. And for like 2 years, we would write skits together. We do all these, we would do all these funny videos because we had a video production team on board and everything. So we would do all this fun stuff, and we did everything together. And then we started when they started adding late night shows in the back of the ship, in the back lounge. Usually on a cruise ship, you have the shows in the big theater, and the comedian is usually the headliner for a variety show. You might have a juggler, a singer, or sometimes the comedian will just be by himself, but it's in the big theater on an off night when they don't have the production shows.
Okay.
And so then they would have an R-rated show for 18 and over in the back of the ship. And when Carnival added a second one, they had to turn over the room. So I took the experience I had as an usher at Hilarities, where I learned how clubs are run, behind the scenes, because I never really paid attention when I was a working comic. And so I ended up running my room like a comedy club for 2 years, and I would open up for the comedians. And one night, one of the comedians missed the ship because he forgot his passport. And the cruise director made me the headliner and gave me the rest of the day off. And I showed up wearing my suit and tie backstage. And I went up and I killed in front of 1,500 people in the theater. This was like, July or August or something of 2009. And unbeknownst to me, he wrote up a review for me just like he would for one of the headlining comedians. And the front office or the head office in Miami read the review and they go, wow, we got a kid who's a stand-up comedian who used to work for us as a comedian, and now he is a crew member, and now he can fill in for comedians. They go, well, he's the guy for our new comedy club. The Carnival Dream was going to be their newest ship, and it was going to be launching in October of 2009. And they decided that they were going to have a standalone comedy club, a full-time comedy club open every night of the week in the back of the ship. And they needed somebody to run the program. And so I ended up getting the nod. And then for like 8 years, I helped Carnival grow the Punchliner. It started with one little room on the Carnival Glory. I did a 6-week test program where we experimented with show times. We had tickets. We had to clear the room like a real comedy club. We had posters. I was in charge of all the advertising on the ship and all that kind of stuff. And we had like 20 shows a week. Wow. And at the end of my, I think it was like 2 PG rated shows at family shows for each comic and 3 R rated shows for each comic. And we'd have 4 comics, 2 in the first half of the cruise, 2 in the back. And we finally got the formula after like 6 weeks. And then they said, okay, you're going to go to the Dream and you're going to start the first ever Carnival Comedy Club. And they called it Carnival Comedy Club. And we debuted it in New York City in November of 2009. And they had the big christening and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of like New York media came and saw our first shows. And then it was so successful that not only did they keep the test club on the Glory and bring in an off-duty cruise director to run it until they got a ship, we ended up putting it on 3 or 4 more ships. Me personally, they sent me around the fleet. And within a year, we had a Punchliner in just about every ship. Wow. And so now that's down to 3 because Carnival sold all the ships. But Hertz Rent-A-Ship is going to have a comedy club in the back of that new line. Have you heard of them? The big yellow boats?
No, is that real?
No.
Oh, I was like, wow. That would not surprise me though. I'm not gonna lie. Like, somebody coming over. So
yeah. So when I was running the program, a gentleman by the name of David Carlo, who used to book the Funny Bones out of St. Louis, they gave him the job that I tried out for, which is be the director of the entire program. I lost out to him because I didn't have any corporate experience running a team or anything like that, management experience. So he and I helped grow the program, and it got to the point where I was the person watching all the submissions from the website, and we would go every year to the Just for Laughs Festival in Montreal and look for comics. Wow. And here is how we turned our vision for the Punchliner was, like you said, to it's no longer a place where comics are put out to pasture. Yeah. We wanted to bring like the best cutting edge comics that you see with specials or headlining, top comedy clubs in New York or LA, and give them a place to work. And the ships pay the best money, and you don't have to worry about putting butts in the seats because you've got 500 to 700 people in every show. Some of the clubs sit 250, 300. My club sat like 600 comfortably, 7 at standing. So it was this huge lounge in the back of the ship. When standing room only, 700 people. And wow. Even the kid shows, we would have 500 people in there. And so every night on a cruise ship, you are playing to a captive audience. And the challenges of working the Punchliner Comedy Club program was when you get hired to work a cruise ship, there is no opening act. Now, the reason why everybody wanted to work my ship was because I was a professional comedian and they let me be the house MC. And for many, many years, I didn't have any extra duties, and I spent all day as a writer in residence working on my act. And so at the end of 8 years, I had like 25 different 5 to 10 minute sets, and I only needed 20 spots during the week. And it got to the point where I was filling in for comedians who missed the ship, which happened more and more because I was the guy telling them what time the ship left.
Sabotage.
And my cruise director's like, Jeff, this is the 5th time this has happened this week. Who is to blame for this happen? I go, the same person who's to blame for everything, Barack Obama. So, and
Jeff's out there like, thanks, Obama.
Yeah, I know, because at that time Obama was being blamed for everything, so
Yeah.
that was my catchphrase. And eventually, a lot of the guys on the ship would get the joke because they watched CNN in the. But anyway, so when you went to work for the Punchliners for Carnival Cruise Lines, you were contracted to do 3 half-hour shows.
Wow.
1 PG show repeated once, and 2 R-rated shows. 1 of them repeated once. However, by the time that we started bringing new comedians in, our veterans really adapted to the program, and they found that on my ship, the idea of having repeat shows so that you can turn over the room and get everybody on a ship to see a show, which is why we had repeat shows, wasn't working on the other ships because the less experienced hosts who weren't comedians didn't know how to host a show. They didn't know how to advertise a show. So people were coming back to see every show thinking it was new. And the comedians had to, put together different sets. So pretty much 5 different shows became the standard. So when you were a new comic working for Carnival, I tell you to say 3 different shows, then you'd go on and then you'd get smoked, So here's what a challenge it was. You have to do 5 different half-hour comedy shows, and the PG rated shows, you have kids in the audience, and sometimes the parents would just leave them there so that they'd be like, a bunch of kids in the front row. You have to be, they see comedians all around the fleet. People who are on for 2 cruises saw 4 comedians before you, and they see the other 3 comedians with you. So you have to be original enough that people haven't seen anything, yet you have to be universal enough that you can make all the different demographics. When you're in a comedy club on a cruise ship, you have Black people, white people, Hispanic people, Asian people. You've got punk rock teenagers. You got rednecks. You got good old boys. You got intellectuals. Everybody's right there. I mean, and you can have an African American family right over here. Then you've got a bunch of college kids over here, older white folks right over here. And they're all there looking at you, and you have to make them all laugh, and you have to kill, and you have to be original so nobody accuses you of being a joke thief or a hack. And then you have to deal with all the distractions. On our ship was different because I had the support of everybody and they knew me, so we ran it like a comedy club. But on the other ships, they didn't have that resource. So you would go to a ship, and this happened to me when I retired and I went to work for Carnival as a comic again. It was like the Wild Wild West. They didn't, blenders going, waiters walking on the stage. I mean, waiters wouldn't just, how in comedy clubs, waiters, like I've had waiters like walk on the stage behind me to get to the other side.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I've had them like sit on the stage, like to go, to take an order and talk to people and stuff like that. So all that kind of stuff that's happening, people on their phones, people shouting, fights breaking out, all that kind of stuff happens. Everybody, the staff coming in, the dancers and the cruise directors, and holding court at the bar while you're on stage talking, and so I spent years trying to deal with that stuff. And, I wrote manuals that, training manuals for the fleet. So eventually everybody all the cruise directors got hip to it. And it's the quality of the club started going up. And then they started training guys, and they made comedy club host a real job. So when things go back to normal, Punchliner fleet, like 20 some ships, because even though they lost like 6 ships, they're adding like 3, so it's around 23. And each ship has this beautiful comedy club with a background and a staff and a technician, lighting tech, sound tech, and you are up in front of 300, 500 people every night. And on the newer ships, which have a smaller club, they actually started designing the clubs to get rid of some of the flaws in the earlier comedy clubs. So now there's no bars in the room. The bars are in a pantry in the back. There's no poles, there's some Croatians and some Czechs, but there's no poles. So they really put a lot of effort into the program. But if you can work dirty and clean at the drop of a hat, if you can work a crowd, you have to be able to work the crowd but not rely on it.
Right.
You have to be able to slam people. Even kids, like some of the best fun is doing the kid shows. Is you get little kids that are little snotheads, and you just nail them, and the adults go, you just rip them, and especially when they say something snotty, and you just make them look like an idiot. Even like people would like, hey, that's my kid. I can't do this to him. You do it. You put him in his, But the thing is about working cruise ships is, you say one wrong thing, or you handle a kid wrong and you embarrass him, or you smart off to a platinum guest, or somebody who's on their phone or talking or heckling you. If you don't handle it just right, there's hell to pay.
Right.
So the hard thing, the entire fleet has great intentions, but they don't know how to set up with. As a comedian, you're not set up to succeed. You're set up to fail. Okay. But you have to succeed. So it's a really tall order. That's why most of the comedians that work for the cruise lines are veterans of 20 years, 30 years. And the great thing is, in the olden days, comics would go to a cruise ship, and like you said, they would just hack it up. They would do stolen material. They do the same act, and they would never write again. Nowadays, comedians who maybe are a little bit hacky or a little bit like their act is a little bit tired, they get the cruise ship work and they come work for us. And next thing you know, they're in their cabin writing every day, taping all their shows. And after That's 2 awesome. Years of doing, 5 shows a cruise in front of hundreds of people, your act. I mean, a lot of these comics that work for Carnival Cruise Lines for the Punchliner program are monsters.
Yeah. That sounds awesome. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's going to take me a while to build up 5 different 30-minute sets, man. That's crazy. What about you, Luke?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not there.
Well, you can start with three 30-minute sets. But even the guys that we had that were like college acts, because college, the college circuit is great training for the cruise ships. Mm-hmm. Because you're expected to do great. The people that don't respect you and they don't know how to set up the show, and you have to make it work. Right. There's one comedian that he goes around with a microphone and just works the crowd in the audience. He did it one time out of frustration. Now it's become his shtick. But so we would get like a lot of newer comics that were very, very good. And they were able to do maybe 3 shows, maybe 4, but they had been doing it like we would consider inexperienced comics with 7 to 10 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just coming up on 5 years, but I mean, last year I'm not even counting because we had shows at the beginning of the year and then nothing. I did some Zoom shows or whatever, but nothing. So that kind of hurt my momentum because I was getting ready to work on my full hour. I was like, this was the year 2020 was the year I was going to develop the rest of my hour. I have like 20, 25 minutes, but not a full hour. So yeah.
I've done, I think I did during the pandemic, I think I've done 300 shows, but they were all in Ybor City in Tampa, the weekend of the Super Bowl. Yeah. I came back with COVID and a MAGA hat. I'm a winner.
Oh, wow.
And what's really difficult now is one of the best things that happened to me was when I in 2017, Carnival was restructuring things, and they could no longer afford my job. And so I got to do one more contract where I got to run the comedy club. I got to do all my shows. I got to do my time. Like it was a special arrangement just for me. I got like the top money that they paid for that position. But what happened is then they said I had to be a regular host. So I did one more contract where I was, every year I would end up doing more extra duties, like on the gangway or, what they call tenders, or hosting activities, trivias, dance parties. And I would use that as a chance to promote the club and everything. And the trade-off was I would get my own shows on the nights off, where I get to like be the headliner in the comedy club. And so I did one more contract, and I was up at 6 a.m. doing all the activities, dance parties, murder mysteries, hosting beanbag and volleyball and basketball, and doing shore duty and on the pier, and all that stuff, everything, anything that calling bingo, I did it all. And then at night I would be, doing my shows. And it was, but the trade-off is I got to do my own shows on like like between the two sets of comics. So I would do my 3 core shows. So I would get 3 shows, 1 PG and 2 Rs, every cruise for 6 months. Wow. And so I was doing my core 3 shows that I needed contractually to work for Carnival. And halfway through my first contract, I had my own shows every week. And I also was halfway through my contract, I was booked up through December as a comic. So what happened in August, I had my little 10-year pension, a little like a retirement check,
Yeah.
Not a lot, but and then I was booked up through December, and they most new comics would get like 2 gigs a week. 2 cruises a month. And they gave me 4 for 5 months instead of 2 for 6 months, like an accelerated rookie. And I got off the ship like August 13th. And I think 3 days later, August 16th, I was going back on another ship as a comedian.
Wow.
And after my initial run, you get graded very unfairly on cruise ships, because you have kids from all around the world. And a lot of times they don't understand American comedians, or they're younger. And so they want older, more experienced comics to relate to the guests. So the same comics that the guests love and they kill, the 19-year-olds from England can't stand. So they're grading you on what they think of your act, and not whatever. So I ended up, instead of being one of those guys that was making 6 figures right out of the box, a lot of our guys, they didn't work for anybody else. They got their month of ships, said goodbye to their kids and their wife, and they were out at sea, doing multiple ships. I had to work a little bit harder. So I was forced right in the beginning of going back into comedy in 2017, 2018. I had to start hustling for land gigs, corporate work. So although it was kind of a downer for me, and I didn't feel like I was getting all the work that I deserved for Carnival, because it was going very well for me. I was had great shows and I loved it. The thing is I had to go out and knock on doors and get back in with clubs and get a website, do everything. And instead of just being spoiled and working the cruise ships, not knowing if I was going to still be on the roster every year, forced me to really hustle. And because of that, I was able to work during the pandemic. I had gigs all the way up through the end of the year that I had lots of great tours that I put together that got destroyed by the pandemic, like tours where I'd be on a cruise ship, then I'd get off in Florida, have a corporate gig, and then a private gig, and then a comedy club, and maybe a one-nighter for like a month and a half. All these, or you go to a certain part of the country and you have all these dates that you string together from different bookers and everything. Maybe a theater gig, maybe a corporate gig, maybe a bar show, and they're all in the same week. Things at Beauty that were just destroyed. But the great thing is because it was a little bit tougher for me to use the cruises as my sole source of income, diversifying my comedy portfolio kept me working through the pandemic, because when the cruise ships were shut down, our best comics, you know, they never had to work. They haven't had to work a club in 10 years.
Yeah.
So there was nothing to fall back on.
And you also had like the addition of being able to be a comedy writer, that's a lot of comedians don't work that muscle as much as they should. You're right. They like rely on this joke's worked for 10 years. This joke's worked for whatever years. And I'm just going to keep using that joke until I either have an album or a special. And then I'll start over again if I need to or whatever. And
Well,
so
on a cruise ship, it's more like, wow, that joke worked for the last cruise. How come it didn't work this one? You know, when you're working the ships, you have to first it starts that you have to tweak all your stuff.
right.
And then you have to either you're taking like dirty stuff and you're making it clean, or you're taking clean stuff and you're making it dirty, because we got guys that don't do dirty shows and they have to do the adult show, so they're spicing it up. So you're constantly tweaking, and then you've got to, you know, and there's people coming who've seen you before, so you're constantly writing new material and trying it out. So a lot of times that having to work on their acts, you know, and make it work, that fight or flight response, comedically speaking, kind of made comics fall in love with the process again.
Yeah.
And because a lot of comics they didn't have enough confidence in themselves, and they didn't think they can make their act relevant, and so they were just kind of like living in denial. But then when they have this chance to make this paycheck and support their family and still have fun doing comedy, they're like, I'm going to take this seriously. And the comics that did take the ship seriously found themselves going, I was a great comic then, I can be a great comic now. So then you see comics that were hot maybe in the 80s or 90s now are just smoking on the ships because they're writing every day like they did when they're in their 20s or their 30s. Mm-hmm. And so you have to, because and it's challenging, because I wasn't kidding. You when you're on a cruise ship, sometimes you'll be like back to back. You'll do like the formula is usually they'll fly you into a port, you'll get on the ship, and you'll do your allotment of shows for the back half of a cruise. Then you'll go to the home port, whether it's Miami, Orlando, Galveston, San Diego, or have you, and everybody will get off. And you'll go through immigration and spend the rest of the day, you know, New Orleans, whatever, you know, having a good time, and you get back on the ship and it's a brand new audience. And so what people don't realize is, because of the fluctuations in bookings and prices and things that are going on seasonally in ports, special offers, or times of year, you know, when, you know, sometimes, you know, parents are really busy and kids are really busy with school. So that's when you get the older folks coming out. So in any given cruise, you can have a completely different demographic than you did the week before. And it could throw all of your tweaking and all of your game plan for how you have your jokes arranged, the way that you've been approaching the show. I mean, there are times when, you know, the audience, if you go up and you go, hey, how's everybody doing? They go, shut up and do your jokes. And there are other, you know, and there are other times that if you go up and you just, you know, if you just do your jokes, people are like, you're not real. And there are other times when you go up and if you keep the BS to a minimum, you just go up and just boom it and take your time and be almost kind of like deadpan, you're destroying. And so you have to find different ways to do your act. Sometimes working the crowd will win them over for you and you're a comedy god. Other times working the crowd will lose the audience. And so there, other than your core act, instead of having a specific way that you do things all the time, you can't say, okay, I'm on a ship, so I'm going to do it this way. I did it this way for that audience, and tonight I'm going to get a taste to see what the crowd is like. And usually your first show, they have you do one show, like a welcome aboard show, the first night of the cruise. You have that one show to walk around, look at people, watch the other comedians perform, go to some of the events, see how they react to the cruise director. I would go watch the cruise director shows because I know all his jokes and all his little gags and little bits and everything. And I, you know, sometimes something that people would be like, oh, that's wonderful. They go, come on, how many cruises do we have to watch this crap? And then you realize, okay, these people are a little more cynical or a little harder to please. Or then there's people, you know, it's 8 o'clock at night and they're already drunk screaming at the dancers. So then you go, okay, this is a party cruise, you know? And you know, I would take different outfits sometimes to dress differently for different crowds, you know? And I would have certain jokes that I would only do if it was like a booze cruise. I had some jokes that I would do only if it was like an older demographic. And the great thing is when not only do you learn how to make it work, but then you excel and you're killing after you go on. Some kid screws up your introduction. And you walk up on stage, and the Filipino waiter is there, you know, standing on the stage giving people their drink right when you open. Next thing you know, you're killing, and you're dealing with all that stuff. It's great. So I think the hardest thing for cruises right now, for cruise comedians, is being off for a year. The damage it's done to our acts. You know, because all the comics that worked for Carnival, there was like over 200 people on the roster. They really worked hard, some amazing comedians, to figure out all the different ships, all the different runs, all the different home ports. Each home port, each ship, like, you know, some ships where, you know, good old boys would take the misses, you know, out for, you know, a weekend out of gambling, you know, and shopping. Gambling and shopping and eating, and so you get, you know, maybe simpler folks and, you know, with simpler, you know, comedic sensibilities, you know, and maybe they're, you know, a little more country, and then you would get, you know, more like in Miami, you might get more Latino audiences, African American audiences, depending on the cruise. So I mean, it was so different from cruise to cruise.
That's awesome.
And so we all have spent our time developing and cataloging all those nuances, and it becomes like muscle memory, you know, and you can just look at an audience and go, okay, boom, and you go into it like you just kind of, okay, I'm going to act like I did the cruise three months ago because it's the same type of crowd. And now comics haven't been performing for a year, and I'm worried that everyone's going to go back to ships, and that there isn't going to be grace or amnesty from the cruise lines. They're not going to understand that, you know, they should bring in, like, what they should do is bring comics back and have them do like social distancing shows, and maybe do the same show maybe 10 times instead of 10 different shows or whatever. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how hard it is for comedians to adapt to being on the ships again.
Yeah, I think just adapting to clubs too. Wow. We really appreciate having you, Jeff. I mean, this was a great episode. We enjoyed having you. Can you tell people where to find you, where to find your albums, so that we can get more people to, you know, follow you and get you some more bookings and some more shows? Because I'd love to see you everywhere. And when you come out to LA, hang out with us.
Oh yeah. Well, my online home is comedianjeffshaw.com. I've got you know, essays on there. All my videos are on there. And my album is Jeff with 2 Fs. Awesome. If you go to my website, you can order it from the link there, and my physical CDs are being made. Those will be available by mail order pretty soon. But my album's on all the all the platforms, Spotify, you know, Apple Music, Amazon Music. But if you want to help me get back to #1 on Amazon, I have a friend of mine from Cleveland. She released her album too, and she's at #1 now, and I'm down to like #8 on Amazon. So if anybody wants to buy it, and get me up to #1, and I'm taping my 2nd Dry Bar comedy special in March.
Awesome! Congrats.
Yeah, thanks.
That's so cool.
Yeah, a fan of mine asked me how I can have 2 specials and a #1 comedy album and remain so humble. I said, easy. I owe 18 grand on a Toyota Corolla.
That's awesome. Luke, where can everybody find you at?
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, it's comedianjeffshaw.com.
Comedianjeffshaw.com.
And comedian, also at jeffthefunded.com. I have 2 because I went by Jeff the Fun Dude on the cruise ships. So all my social media is at Jeff the Fun Dude, but I bought Comedian Jeff Shaw too, so I don't have to explain to everybody what the heck Jeff the Fun Dude is. Can I tell you this story real quick?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Well, when I first started working for Carnival, everyone, the cruise directors, the hosts, they all had nicknames like Big Sexy, Lido Deck Larry, Dolphin Boy, Princess Fun, this and that. What everybody had like their or whatever. So I was watching with some guys in my cabin. We're watching The Big Lebowski, you know, and at Carnival, everything's fun. They have fun time, fantastic, fun this, fun that, you know, and they always used it as a prefix. And so Jeff Bridges said, "I'm the dude, man." And I go, "Yeah, well, I work for Carnival, so I'm the fun dude," you know. And so I went up and I introduced myself on the first night of the cruise when the staff would go up on stage during the welcome aboard show, and I would go, "Hey, everybody, I'm Jeff the Fun Dude, because I like to have fun, dude. And if you like to have fun, dude, we're gonna have fun together, dude." And I was doing it to mock all my colleagues with their stupid, idiotic nicknames. And so it was an inside joke to mock them, and it caught on to the point where I'm like walking down the street in Mexico and people are sticking their heads out of cabs going, "It's a fun dude." You know? So I think all my social media is at Jeff the Fun Dude, but also like at comedian Jeff Shaw. It's like I've got the dual passport to be on the world.
That's how you do it. Luke, where can everyone find you at?
You can find me at Luke the Fun Dude everywhere.
Nice.
And I must say, like, I really enjoyed your album. It was super funny, and so I do recommend anyone listening to take a listen to Jeff's album. It's hilarious. I haven't laughed that loud or that much at an album lately, so that was I appreciate that.
You don't have tinnitus after listening to my voice for an hour, do you?
No.
Oh, I love it.
Side effect. I think that's the warning label we're supposed to put on the album. You know, but I just want to say that I've been listening to your episodes, and you guys got a good thing going here. I mean,
thank you so much.
Yeah, and I listened to the last one I listened to was with Jared, the comedy coach guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny thing though is like he and I are completely different. Like he's talking about stories, like he likes to do stories and everything.
Yeah.
Like I can help guys with one-liners, but when it comes to like stories, I'm like, you know, like I just don't know how to do it. Like if I had written the Bible, it would have been one day God was in the mood to do stuff. and that would have been it. You know, God needed to get up off the couch, and then that would have been fill in the rest. You know how much, you know, I don't want to bore you. You know, but so these guys, that's so like if you notice in my album, it's all set up punch.
I love it.
Because I really, for the life of me, I could live to 150 and I couldn't figure out how to tell a story on stage.
Well, that's what's great about it is there's all different kinds of comedians, and I love the setup punch style. You know, there's such a good way. I mean, one of my favorites is Rodney Dangerfield. Like I always love him, and that's very much his style too. You know,
absolutely.
And he had a catchphrase. But then I love Bob Newhart, where he would do his little skit, like phone calls and all that stuff. So it's like I love all comedy in between. So I appreciate everything, and that's also why we do this, is so we can learn from everybody too.
My favorite comedian is a guy that one of my favorite comedians is a guy that kind of blends the two. It's like Jake Johansson. He'll do these bits that are like almost like stories, but each beat is another out of left field, off the wall, brilliant punchline that just melts your brain.
That's awesome.
And he, you know, like he'll just go tell you a story about a dream he's had, or going to a Starbucks, whatever, and he takes every single beat of the story, and it's a jewel, it's a quotable jewel that you could see written in a newspaper or whatever, and laugh at that one line. And I think that, you know, all the comedians that I watch now, the younger generation of comics that tell stories, that the key to doing stories is you have to have a premise in the story, and you have to be proving something with the story, and then each point that you're making is you know, like all the points, like if your thesis sentence, and then you do all the things you want to talk about. That story is just like an essay or a story that's imparting a lesson, and you have to make each beat of the story a punchline.
Yep,
I agree. That's what like Christopher Titus does. You know, he writes out he writes out like everything that happened to him, and then he adds jokes to everything.
Yeah.
Like when I was writing about, the cruise ship stuff, a lot of that stuff come just like listing things and then writing a joke.
So smart. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you everybody for listening. You can find me at JamesDCreviston.com or ComedyPreneur.com. Check it out. There's tons of good stuff there. Check out Jeff's album. Help him get back to #1. We got him to #1 on iTunes once. Now let's get him to #1 on Amazon. Let's do it, guys. So thank you again, Jeff. Thanks, Luke, for being here. And thank you for everybody for listening. Please like, subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Bye.